First contact gone wrong. The Sentinel-class observation vessel whispers between stars, hum motionless against the backdrop of Neptune's azure sphere, its adaptive camouflage rendering it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. Senior observer Kexri adjusted her sensory appendages, struggling to process the data streaming across her monitoring station. Something was wrong with these readings, fundamentally, impossibly wrong. Verification complete. Senior observer, her assistant Tolvan announced, his voice carrying the distinct harmonic overtones of professional concern. The structures are indeed occupied. Life signs consistent with the species designation, human detected at all monitored locations. Kexri's outer membrane rippled with disbelief. They had been tracking human expansion through the solar system for the past 3 orbital cycles, but this latest discovery defied all logical analysis. The beings they'd been studying, supposedly a Class 3 pre-spacefaring civilization, when first detected, had constructed vast habitation complexes in Neptune's upper atmosphere. The pressure at those depths should have crushed any conventional materials, yet these humans had not only built there but appeared to be thriving. "Show me the deep scan results," she commanded, her appendages dancing across the control interface. The holographic display expanded, revealing layer upon layer of human engineering. Massive floating cities drifted through the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere, harvesting energy and exotic materials from the perpetual storms. But it was the population numbers that truly stunned her. Over 2 million humans, living and working in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. Senior observer, Tolvan interrupted her contemplation. "We're detecting similar configurations at Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. The human presence in the outer system is extensive." Kexri felt her primary heart constrict. The Confederation's preliminary assessment of Earth had suggested a species barely capable of reaching their own satellite, confined by their biological limitations to a narrow band of habitable conditions. That assessment, she now realized, had been catastrophically wrong. "Bring up the historical data," she ordered, her voice steady despite her growing unease. "Show me their progression from first space launch to present." The display shifted, tracking human expansion across their solar system. It had begun conventionally enough. Primitive chemical rockets, small orbital stations, a handful of lunar outposts. But then something had changed. Instead of following the expected pattern of gradual outward expansion along habitable zones, humans had done the unthinkable. They had adapted themselves and their technology to survive in the most hostile environments imaginable. "They're building something at the core extraction site," Tolvan reported, highlighting a massive structure suspended in Neptune's deeper atmosphere. "Energy signatures suggest." Senior observer, "I believe they're constructing a fusion cascade. The power output would be unprecedented." Kexri studied the construction site with growing horror. The humans weren't just surviving in these impossible conditions. They were mastering them, harnessing forces that most species would never dare to approach. And they were doing it with an efficiency that suggested long familiarity with such extreme engineering. Update from the Solward observation posts. Tolvan continued. "The Venus terraforming project has entered its final phase. They're using the planet's own atmospheric pressure as a containment mechanism for their transformation engines. It's brilliant, actually. The very conditions that make the planet uninhabitable are being." "Enough," Kexri cut him off. She had seen enough to understand the magnitude of their error. The Confederation had designated Earth as a potential candidate for integration, or, if necessary, gentle subjugation. The assessment had suggested humans would be easy to control, confined as they were to their narrow biological requirements. But the species they were observing wasn't confined at all. These humans had looked at the most hostile environments in their solar system and seen not barriers, but opportunities. They had built thriving civilizations in places that would kill most sentient species in seconds, and they had done it all while the Confederation's observers were still debating whether they should be classified as a true spacefaring race. "Send an immediate update to Central Command," Kexri ordered, her membrane now pulsing with urgent warning patterns. Classification update for species human required. Previous assessment critically flawed. Observed capability suggest. She paused, considering her next words carefully. This report would shape the Confederation's entire approach to human relations. Observed capability suggest unprecedented environmental adaptation and engineering expertise. Caution advised in all future interactions. These are not the primitive beings we thought they were. Additional note, she added, her appendages trembling slightly. Recommend immediate cessation of any military planning regarding Sol system. Species human demonstrates consistent pattern of turning hostile environments to their advantage. Any aggressive action likely to be met with unexpected responses. As the whispers between stars prepared to slip back into FTL, Kexri watched the human construction teams continuing their work, seemingly unconcerned by the crushing pressures and toxic atmosphere surrounding them. She had come to study what she thought was a nascent civilization. Instead, she had discovered something far more unsettling. A species that didn't just survive in hell. They built industries there. Plot a course back to Confederation space, she ordered. And mark this system with a Category 1 warning beacon. The humans aren't trapped by their environmental limitations. They've transcended them, and that makes them far more dangerous than anyone realized. The observation vessel vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a solar system where humans continued their relentless expansion, building cities in places where no cities should exist, and turning the most hostile environments imaginable into their newest frontiers. The assessment mistake. The Confederation High Council chamber fell into stunned silence as senior observer Kexri's report concluded. The massive crystalline displays surrounding the chamber still showed images of human installations across the gas giants, evidence that could no longer be ignored. High Counselor Vrentis' scales shifted from their usual diplomatic azure to a troubled gray. You mean to tell us that while we were debating whether to classify them as a proper spacefaring species, these humans were building industrial complexes inside gas giants? That is correct, High Counselor, Kexri responded, her membrane rippling with confirmation patterns. But the gas giant colonies are merely the beginning. Our latest scans reveal something even more disturbing. The displays shifted to show Mercury, the innermost planet of the Sol system, where most species would have seen an uninhabitable wasteland of extreme temperatures and radiation. Humans had seen opportunity. Vast fields of solar collectors covered much of the planet's surface, while underground complexes stretched for hundreds of kilometers. They call it the Solar Forge, Kexri explained. The humans are using Mercury's proximity to their star to power manufacturing processes that require extreme heat. They've turned the planet's day-night temperature differential into an energy generation cycle. The efficiency is remarkable. Impossible, declared technical advisor Genpar, his tentacles writhing in agitation. The surface temperatures alone would melt any conventional materials. The radiation levels are being harnessed to power their shield systems. Kexri interrupted. Humans have developed technologies that don't just survive in extreme conditions, they thrive on them. They're using Mercury's hostile environment as a power source, just as they're using Neptune's pressure for containment vessels. Military Commander Ixtel, who had been quietly observing until now, leaned forward. What are the strategic implications? Our initial assessment suggested their defensive capabilities were limited to their homeworld and a few orbital platforms. Kexri's membrane flushed dark with warning colors. Commander, I must be direct. Any military action against the Sol system would be inadvisable. We've discovered that humans don't think about hostile environments the way we do. Where we see barriers, they see resources. Every environmental challenge they've faced has been turned into a strategic advantage. The displays shifted again, showing the Venusian atmosphere processors, the Mercurian solar forges, and the gas giant industrial complexes. These aren't just colonies or outposts, Kexri continued. They're fortress worlds. The humans have adapted their technology to use the very conditions that make these planets deadly as defensive mechanisms. Explain, Vrenta demanded. Take their Venus installations, Kexri said. The crushing atmospheric pressure that would destroy most ships. They've engineered their structures to channel it, using it to power their atmospheric processors. Any attack would have to contend not just with their defenses, but with an entire planet's worth of pressure that they've learned to control. The chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. The implications were staggering. The Confederation's military doctrine relied heavily on forcing enemies to fight in unfavorable conditions. But how do you apply that strategy to a species that routinely builds cities in environments that should be lethal? There's more, Kexri added, her voice cutting through the chaos. We've detected signs of large-scale construction at multiple points in the system. They're not just adapting to harsh environments. They're actively seeking them out. Every location we would consider uninhabitable, they view as prime real estate for their most critical industries. Commander Ixtel's battle scales had shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of serious concern. You're suggesting that our standard conquest protocols would play directly into their hands, Kexri finished. Think about it, Commander. What's the first thing we do when invading a system? We try to force the defenders into environments they can't survive in. But these humans, they've spent their entire spacefaring history specifically learning how to thrive in exactly those environments. The displays showed one final image, a massive construction project taking shape in Mercury's orbit. Solar collectors larger than cities were being assembled, their purpose unclear but their scale undeniable. We need to fundamentally reassess our understanding of this species, Kexri concluded. They're not primitive, and they're not limited. They've taken every environmental obstacle in their system and turned it into an advantage. If we treat them as a conventional opponent, we risk discovering just how many other impossible things they've learned to do. High Counselor Vrenta was silent for a long moment, his scales cycling through various shades of concern. Finally, he spoke. Recommendation. Immediate diplomatic contact, Kexri said firmly, but not from a position of assumed superiority. We need to approach them as equals, perhaps even as potential teachers, because while we've been watching them and wondering if they're advanced enough to join galactic society, they've been quietly mastering environmental engineering challenges that our own scientists deemed impossible. The council chamber fell silent again, the implications hanging heavy in the air. They had thought they were studying a young species just beginning to reach for the stars. Instead, they had found something far more interesting and far more dangerous, a species that looked at the most hostile environments in existence and saw not barriers but opportunities, a species that didn't just survive in hell, they built civilizations there. And somewhere in the Sol system, unaware of the profound effect they were having on their watchers, humanity continued its relentless expansion, turning one uninhabitable world after another into just another frontier to be conquered. The Siege of Europa. The Confederation battle fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Jovian system, an impressive array of 200 warships arranged in perfect attack formation. Despite the High Council's warnings, military command had insisted on a show of force. Not an invasion, they claimed, but a demonstration of Confederation might to encourage human cooperation. Fleet Admiral Krelix watched Jupiter's massive form dominate the viewscreen, its swirling storms a backdrop to their target, Europa. Intelligence suggested this ice moon housed one of humanity's most important research installations. A precision strike here would show humans the benefits of accepting Confederation protection. Curious, First Officer Myton noted, studying the sensor readings. No defensive platforms detected. No shield generators. Not even basic orbital defenses. Kralix's primary heart clenched with unease. After seeing reports of human engineering across the solar system, this lack of defenses felt wrong. Launch probe ships. Full spectrum analysis. The small unmanned vessels darted forward, their sensors prodding the icy moon. Data began flooding back, and Kralix's unease grew stronger. The ice sheet covering Europa was riddled with structures, not on the surface, but deep within. Massive complexes extended kilometers down into the moon's subsurface ocean. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, detecting unusual energy signatures. "The humans appear to be drawing power from the tidal forces." Before Krelix could respond, new data appeared. The ice sheet wasn't just housing human structures, it was the structure. The entire moon had been engineered, transformed into a single massive installation. The humans hadn't built on Europa. They had rebuilt Europa itself. "Launch the warning shot," Krelix ordered, pushing aside his concerns. "Target the northern polar region. Minimal yield, just enough tow." The beam lanced out from the fleet's lead destroyer, a precisely calculated shot designed to crack the ice and demonstrate their power without causing serious damage. It never reached the surface. Instead, the entire ice sheet lit up with a blue-white glow. The energy from the shot was caught, channeled, and redirected. Krelix watched in horror as his fleet's own weapon energy was fed into what could only be described as a planetary scale lens. Multiple energy signatures detected. Myton shouted, "They're using the entire ice sheet as a focusing array." The returned beam was orders of magnitude more powerful than the original shot, amplified by technologies embedded throughout Europa's structure. 3 Confederation ships vanished in atomic fire before anyone could react. "Full retreat," Krelix commanded, but it was already too late. The ice moon's surface had come alive with activity. What they had mistaken for natural fissures were launch bays, and from them poured swarms of human vessels, each one smaller than a Confederation fighter, but moving with impossible precision. "Sir, they're not attacking," the tactical officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "They're hurting us." Indeed, the human ships weren't firing weapons. Instead, they were maneuvering in complex patterns that forced the Confederation fleet to cluster together. Too late, Krelix realized their mistake. "The moon's orbit," he whispered. "They're using Europa's orbit." The ice moon's position relative to Jupiter had been slowly changing throughout the engagement, a movement so subtle it had gone unnoticed. Now, as the human ships forced the Confederation fleet into a tight formation, Europa's position aligned perfectly with Jupiter's magnetic field. The result was spectacular and terrifying. A massive electromagnetic pulse, powered by Jupiter itself and focused through Europa's engineered ice sheet, washed over the fleet. Systems crashed, engines died, and 200 of the Confederation's finest warships hung helpless in space. "Message incoming," Myton reported, her voice shaky. "Text only, using our own emergency frequencies." The message was brief. "The Europan defense grid welcomes our Confederation visitors. Your ships will be towed to a safe orbit. Refreshments will be provided during the diplomatic discussion of your unauthorized weapons discharge in a populated sector. We look forward to a productive dialogue about preventing future misunderstandings." As human ships began attaching tow cables to the disabled Confederation vessels, Krelix finally understood what the initial survey team had tried to warn them about. These humans hadn't just learned to survive in hostile environments. They had mastered them completely. They had turned an entire moon into a weapon, powered by the largest planet in their system, and they had done it so elegantly that it had looked like natural formations until the moment it was activated. "Send to military command," he ordered, using the few emergency systems still functioning. Message begins. Assessment of human defensive capabilities was critically flawed. Recommend immediate cessation of all military activities in Sol system. These humans don't just adapt to hostile environments, they weaponize them. Europa is not a research station, it's a demonstration. As his ship was gently towed toward a human facility embedded in Europa's ice, Krelix watched the massive form of Jupiter looming behind them. He couldn't help but wonder, if this was what humans could do with a relatively small ice moon, what other surprises were waiting in the rest of their engineered worlds? The Forge worlds. The diplomatic chamber aboard Europa Station hummed with barely contained tension. Fleet Admiral Krelix sat across from Human Ambassador Sarah Chen, his scales still fluctuating between embarrassment purple and concern gray. Behind him, the viewport showed his disabled fleet being methodically repaired by human engineering drones. "Let me be clear, Admiral," Chen said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of a seasoned diplomat. "We didn't engineer Europa as a weapon. We engineered it as a research center for extreme environment physics. Its defensive capabilities are a side effect of its primary function." Krelix's translator struggled with what might have been human humor in her tone. "A side effect that disabled 200 warships. Admiral, you fired upon what is essentially a planetary-scale particle physics laboratory. The defensive response was automated, designed to protect the facility's more sensitive experiments." She gestured to a holographic display materializing between them. "Perhaps a tour of our actual military installations would help prevent future misunderstandings." The display showed Mars, but not the red planet of historical record. This Mars gleamed with rivers of molten metal, its surface transformed into what Chen called a foundry world. "You see, Admiral, Europa isn't where we build our weapons," Chen explained. "It's where we study the physics that make our actual military technology possible. If you'd like to see our real defensive capabilities." The hologram expanded, showing the Martian polar regions. What Krelix had assumed were impact craters were actually vast circular accelerators, using the planet's magnetic field to contain and direct plasma streams hot enough to rival stars. "We call it the Forge of Mars," Chen continued. "The entire planet is essentially one massive manufacturing facility. The surface temperature is maintained at near melting point for most metals, allowing us to shape materials in ways that would be impossible in conventional facilities." Krelix felt his primary heart skip a beat. "You deliberately made the planet hotter." "Of course. Cool metal is harder to work with. By maintaining the surface at optimal forging temperature, we can manufacture on a planetary scale." Chen's smile carried that hint of humor again. "Did you think we were terraforming Mars to make it habitable? No, Admiral. We were turning it into something far more useful." The display shifted again, showing massive structures rising from the Martian surface, shipyards that dwarfed anything in the Confederation's arsenal. But these weren't delicate orbital facilities. They were built directly into the planet's crust, using the intense heat and pressure as part of the manufacturing process. "Your assessment teams made the same mistake everyone does," Chen said. "They saw our work on Mars and assumed we were trying to make it more Earth-like. They never considered that we might be deliberately making it more extreme. After all, why would any species choose to make a planet more hostile? Because hostile environments enable manufacturing processes that would be impossible elsewhere." Krelix realized, his scales shifting to understanding blue. "Exactly. Europa's intense pressure and unique magnetic environment make it perfect for particle physics. Mars's heat makes it an ideal forge. Mercury's solar exposure powers our most energy-intensive projects." Chen leaned forward. "Admiral, your fleet didn't stumble into a weapons platform. You stumbled into a research park. If you'd actually found one of our military installations." The hologram changed one final time, showing something that made Krelix's scales blanch to pure white. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden within a cluster of unremarkable rocks, was something that defied comprehension. Dozens of hollowed-out asteroids, each one converted into what Chen called a gravity forge, using artificially generated gravitational fields to compress matter into states that shouldn't be possible. "That," Chen said quietly, "is where we build our actual weapons. Would you like to discuss a mutual defense treaty? One that ensures no other Confederation ships accidentally stumble into our physics experiments." Krelix stared at the display, finally understanding the true scope of humanity's achievements. They hadn't just learned to survive in hostile environments. They had learned to harness them, to use conditions that should be lethal as tools for creation. Every hostile world in their system had been transformed not into a copy of Earth, but into something uniquely suited for its particular brand of extremity. "I'll need to contact the High Council," he said finally. "Of course," Chen replied. "In the meantime, Would you like a tour of our facilities here on Europa? I think you'll find our approach to practical physics quite interesting. We're currently working on some fascinating applications of quantum tunneling using the moon's ice sheet as a conducting medium. As he followed the ambassador deeper into humanity's impossible moon-spanning laboratory, Krelix couldn't help but wonder, what would these humans achieve once they started expanding beyond their solar system? And more importantly, how had everyone so completely misunderstood their true nature? The price of underestimation. The Confederation High Council chamber was packed to capacity. Representatives from every major spacefaring civilization had gathered to witness humanity's formal response to the Confederation's treaty proposal. Senior observer Kexri noticed her former assistant Tolvan among the diplomatic staff, his appendages twitching with barely contained excitement. The human delegation stood out starkly against the sea of alien forms. Ambassador Chen, now joined by Dr. Marcus Wong, Director of Solar System Engineering, commanded attention despite being physically smaller than most species present. Honored members of the Council, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the translator fields. We appreciate the Confederation's interest in forming closer ties with humanity. However, before we proceed, Dr. Wong has prepared a presentation that we believe will help prevent future misunderstandings. The chamber's holographic systems activated, but instead of the expected diplomatic displays, they showed a live feed from Sol, specifically from deep within Neptune's atmosphere, where human engineering teams were completing something unprecedented. What you're watching, Dr. Wong explained, is the final calibration of our first stellar manipulation array. We've been using the gas giants as testing grounds for technologies that will eventually allow us to modify and stabilize dying stars. The Council erupted in shocked murmurs. Stellar engineering was theoretical at best, considered impossible by most. Yet here were humans, casually demonstrating it as if it were routine. You see, Wong continued, everything we've built in our solar system, the forges of Mars, the particle laboratories of Europa, the gravity wells of the asteroid belt. They're all prototypes, test beds for technologies we'll need as we expand into the galaxy. The display shifted to Venus, where massive atmospheric processors were doing something that defied conventional physics. This, Wong said, is our latest breakthrough. We're not just processing Venus's atmosphere, we're learning to engineer it, to create custom atmospheric conditions that can transform any planet's weather into a tool. High Counselor Vrentis' scales had shifted to a deep purple of astonishment. You mean to tell us that your entire solar system is essentially one massive research and development facility? Yes, Chen finished. Every hostile environment, every extreme condition, has taught us something new. Something we can use to help other civilizations survive and thrive in conditions they thought impossible. The display changed one final time, showing something that caused several council members to emit involuntary stress pheromones. At Mercury's orbit, humans had constructed what they called a solar laboratory, a facility designed to study and manipulate the fundamental forces of stellar physics. We're not interested in conquest, Chen stated firmly. We're interested in expansion, yes, but not through military might. We want to expand the boundaries of what's possible, to help transform deadly worlds into cradles of innovation. Kexri watched as understanding dawned across the council chamber. The humans hadn't built fortresses in hell because they were warlike. They'd done it because they were curious. Each hostile environment mastered wasn't a military achievement, it was a scientific one. Our proposal is this, Chen continued. Instead of a traditional military alliance, we offer technology sharing. Our experience in extreme environment engineering in exchange for the Confederation's knowledge of faster-than-light travel. Together, we could transform dead worlds into living laboratories, turn cosmic hazards into tools for advancement. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't offering submission or even equal partnership. They were offering to revolutionize how civilization itself approached hostile environments. One final demonstration, Dr. Wong said quietly. The display zoomed in on a project taking shape in the Kuiper Belt, a massive structure that seemed to bend space itself. This is our first attempt at creating artificial gravity wells strong enough to stabilize wormholes. We think, with the Confederation's FTL expertise, we could perfect it within a decade. High Counselor Vrentis Scales had shifted to decision green. I believe, he said carefully, that we have vastly underestimated not just humanity's capabilities, but their potential contribution to galactic civilization. As the council chamber erupted in excited discussion, Kexri reflected on her first observations of human civilization. She had thought she was studying a species learning to survive in hostile environments. Instead, she had discovered a species that had moved far beyond mere survival. They had learned to turn the most extreme conditions in the universe into tools for advancement. The price of underestimation wasn't just the embarrassment of a failed show of force. It was the realization that while the Confederation had been watching humans and wondering if they were worthy of inclusion in galactic society, humans have been quietly mastering forces that most species hadn't even dreamed of controlling. As the Council began formal proceedings to accept Earth's counter-proposal, Ambassador Chen caught Kexri's eye and smiled. In that smile, Kexri saw the future, one where humanity's drive to master the impossible would transform not just their solar system, but the entire galaxy. The humans hadn't just learned to thrive in hell. They had learned to turn hell itself into a force for creation. And now, they were offering to teach others to do the same.